Welcome back. You're watching The Agenda with me, Unathi Bagyashe. Let's continue to this now. The spotlight in South Africa increasingly shines on the importance of university degrees and employment prospects for graduates. How employable are South Africa's university graduates? Is South Africa encountering challenges akin to the oversupply of PhD degree holders seen in many developing economies? Now, moreover, do our tertiary education qualifications align with industry demands? And what about emerging career paths incorporating AI technology? Well, to delve deeper into these issues, we speak now with Professor Salim Vally, an esteemed education analyst. Prof, thank you so much for your time this morning. So I unpacked, of course, a number of questions there in that introduction, essentially asking the question, how do we assess the current employability of South Africa's university graduates?
Thank you, Unathi, and good morning to you and the listeners. I think you've identified the problem. Just to say that the Human Sciences Research Council last year issued a report which is quite alarming, actually, that the unemployment rate of young graduates between the ages of 25 and 34 has increased by almost 7 percentage points. Now, this is the irony, Unathi, that, for 30 years, we've been fed a particular diet, I would call it of market fundamentalism, which is that there is a skills mismatch problem. Education fails to provide young people with skills for employment. And all of this discourse focuses on educational institutions and what the economists call the supply side. But really, the more useful and important question is the demand side. And that is usually ignored, which is how can we create decent jobs that require these valuable skills that clearly people have. Doctors, newly graduated medical students are unemployed, others as well. So, it's a structural problem, it's a systemic problem, it's where are the jobs? So people might have the skills. We were always told that they don't have the skills that industry requires. But that's a really simplistic discourse. And in a sense, we are held hostage by industry and big business because they are not creating jobs. But there's also the failure of the imagination of the state. Livelihoods and jobs are not just predicated on business. Because for business, the labor market is about their profitability, is not about society.
Yeah, and Prof, I want to go back to the analogy that you used about being served this diet. What we're also seeing, you talked about medical doctors. What we're also seeing is that people will go through great lengths, to hold a PhD degree, which is an important degree in their lifespan or the career. But are there signs of an oversupply issue here in terms of PhD holders in South Africa, akin to what we are currently observing in the developed economies? And should people rather strive then to get these necessary skills that we speak of?
Well, there are two issues in your question. It's a very important question. Our society needs more educated people, more people with skills, with knowledge, with PhDs, that, otherwise our society will be impoverished. We need these people. Our population is growing. So, the point I'm making is that we need to create possibilities, and the responsibility lies squarely on the state and society, not on the individuals, because they are facing tremendous obstacles to procuring decent and remunerative employment. So it's not a question of not having those skills, the more the better. It's how can they be valuable to our society? You see, the problem is not merely simplistically about inadequate career planning models or the lack of entrepreneurial skills. The point is that knowledge, skills, and the competencies derived from education and training are critically important for all societies and the well-being of nations. But if we reduce this value to the labor market needs of employers, to the exclusion of the wider societal purposes, it's really a serious limitation on the role, the social role of these young people. You know, when I talk about the failure of imagination, we're talking about livelihoods that are required in communities, whether it's healthcare, early childhood development, care for the aged, the disabled, local-based economic activities, cooperatives. You don't need businesses. So cultural activities, you know, people have gone for the MBAs, etc., thinking they will get a job. One can understand the anxieties of these young people and their parents. They want jobs.
And Prof,
but I think our assumptions are very narrow.
Yeah, and Prof, you know, just talking about that, of course, we are now seeing that there is a challenge as it relates to how aligned tertiary, education is, tertiary institutions are to what is currently needed in the industry. Let's now talk about, we're speaking about these challenges that are, really impacting on South African graduates. So how then do they adapt, in this changing job market, as it were? We talked earlier a little bit about, medical doctors, but there's so many others, other graduates who are sitting at home, who are faced with these challenges, this misalignment. How then do they start beginning to think about, ways in which they can creatively adapt to the changing job market?
As I explained earlier, Unati, this burden should not be put on the shoulders of these young people as individuals. We have a responsibility as society to address the structural problems and our assumptions about the purpose of education. Education is absolutely necessary. Skills are. But it has a particular role. The bigger role is the way the economy is structured, the way jobs are created. And here I am, that's why I'm saying, let us, with urgency, it might not help the people who are struggling right now, unfortunately, but let's talk about the generations to come. Let's talk about livelihoods outside of the labor market, outside of workers' productivity that will help communities. So primary health care in communities. And this is the responsibility of the media, of the state, and of business as well, to understand that for 30 years, unemployment, inequality has increased. So when we talk about neoliberalism, it's not an abstract ideological issue. It's about how our society understands skills, knowledge, and the value and purpose of this. By the way, I want to say that those who argue that it's just STEM, it's just science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and not literature, history, philosophy, music, the emphasis they want to put on STEM, that's wrong. It must be both. And our science people have to understand the way society is structured. And similarly, our arts and social science and literature students need to understand the economy as well. And all of that will make us a richer country. Many companies as well say that we can train people on the job with skills, but we need critical thinkers, we need problem solvers, thinkers. We need people who understand the world. We're dealing with climate catastrophe today. You can't understand climate catastrophe through one discipline alone. It involves everything. And this is what we saw with the HIV/AIDS crisis pandemic in our country. It's not just a biomedical issue. It's an issue of philosophy, of gender issues, of inequality, of political economy. So I am calling for, and many critical educators are calling for, don't blame education. Look at other aspects of society. There's a lot wrong with education, of course. I won't deny that.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. Of course, I always say the issue also needs to start, very early on in terms of before we even get, children in matric, because as you and I know, we have in the region of, over 800,000 matriculants who then have the potential of going to tertiary institutions, but we don't have enough of those even, so we need to start thinking, as you also say, outside of course, just looking at the way in which things are at the moment and start looking at other situations and solutions. But thank you so much for your insights. And of course, this conversation will definitely continue. Professor Salim Vally there, an esteemed education.